The first fruits of Zionism weren't apples. They were a new brand of Judaism, Israeli Judaism, Yahadut Yisraelit. So forget about cheesecake. This is what Shavuot is really about. Welcome to Madlik. My name is Jeffrey Stern, and at Madlik we light a spark or shed some light on a Jewish text or tradition. Along with Rabbi Adam Mintz, we host Madlik Disruptive Torah on your favorite podcast platform and now on YouTube. We also publish a source sheet on Sparia, and a link is included in the show notes. This week we are counting the last days of the Omer as we get ready for Shavuot, or as it is known in the Torah, Chag HaBikurim, the holiday of the first fruits. We have invited Eran Yarkoni, CEO of the Shittim Institute, to share with us the fascinating story about the renewal of the Bikurim ceremonies in the 1920s in Israel in the Jezreel Valley, with powerful cultural and historical significance resonating up until today. So, join us for the first fruits of Israeli Judaism. Welcome back, Adam. We missed you last week, and welcome, Eran. For us, it is a reunion. This is the second Chag that we are doing. We did a podcast a few years ago on the amazing collection that you have at Beit HaShittim of the Haggadah, but I think the story that we're going to tell today is going to be even more reflective of what your institute is doing. And with that, I'd like you to introduce us to Beit HaShita that you are the CEO of, and then we'll delve into Chag HaBikurim.
Hi, absolutely. This is one of the most symbolized holiday of the kibbutz tradition and legacy. And a few words about our institute. Our institute started in the 40s of the last century by a man called Aryeh Ben-Gurion. He was the nephew of the first prime minister, and he was called to be an educator in the kibbutz during the 40s. And as an educator, he wanted to connect the children of the kibbutz to the roots of for their identity, and he asked other kibbutzim what they are doing for Shabbat, how they are celebrating Hanukkah, how they celebrate Bar Mitzvah, and he collect all these answers, and they become an expertise in Israeli Jewish Israeli culture. And when Aryeh passed away in the late 90s, he left behind an archive with more than 1 million documents that document everything that developed in the kibbutzim around the life cycle and year cycle and holidays and ceremonies and things like this. And this is what we have. This is our treasure trove that we work with as an inspiration for educators these days.
It's unbelievable. I came to visit you, and truly there is an archive, and you can see whole sections about Pesach, about Chag HaBikurim, about weddings and milestone events. In Israel, there are many Jews who are secular, and for instance, when the tragedies of the last 2 years occurred, many Jews were looking for rituals that they could use that resonated with them, and Aaron and his team would go into the archives and find memorial services, would find Shiva services that were developed by these early pioneers. We all hear about the pioneers creating a new Jew. What we don't necessarily know is that they also created a new Judaism. And when we go to Israel, especially as Americans, many of us think in terms of, what about Reform Judaism? What about conservative Judaism? And the truth is that those are all exports exports or imports, depending in which direction you're looking. But what we're going to look today is the genesis of how this group came up with a new reinvention of the holiday that we are about to celebrate. So let's go back to the original sources. In Exodus 34:22, it says, "You shall observe the Feast of Weeks of the first fruits of the wheat harvest and the Feast of Ingathering at the turn of the year." Rabbi, there's really no mention of giving of the Torah on Shavuot. We count the Omer. The word Omer literally refers to, I believe, the Omer wheat. It's part of the agricultural cycle. And so if you look at the verses themselves, you really see a true harvest agricultural festival. Am I right?
You are 100% right. I'll just add one thing. Pesach has a dual aspect. It's both agricultural, but it's also the time of of freedom. Sukkot also has a dual aspect that we remember the Sukkah in the desert and is agricultural. Shavuot only has an agricultural. The giving of the Torah, the giving of the Ten Commandments came later. I'll just say one interesting little twist, and that is that in the days of the temple, the months were determined based on the sighting of the new moon. So the months weren't fixed. So the idea that the holiday of Shavuot, that the Torah was given exactly on the 6th day of Sivan, which is the holiday of Shavuot, that wasn't always true. So actually, that's only a later development that connected the giving of the Ten Commandments with Shavuot. So it's very exciting to talk now about the agricultural element of Shavuot.
Great. So in Deuteronomy, it ties it also, and I think this is going to become more and more significant as the discussion continues, as when you enter the land of Israel. It says, when you enter the land of your God that is giving you as a heritage, and you possess it and settle in it, you shall take some of the every first fruit of the soil of the land, which you harvest from the land that your God is giving you, put it in a basket, and go to the place where your God will choose to establish the divine name. That came to mean the temple. It could have been the local temple, but obviously when the temple was centralized, it was in Jerusalem. You shall go to the priest in charge at that time and say to him, I acknowledge this day before your God that I have entered the land that God swore to our fathers to assign us. The priest shall take the basket from your hand, set it down in front of the altar of God. You shall then recite as follows before God, and those of you who read the Haggadah a few months ago will recognize this. My father was a fugitive Aramean. He went down to Egypt with meager numbers. And then it goes on, and where the Haggadah ends is on verse 8, that God freed us from Egypt with a mighty hand by an outstretched arm and awesome power and signs and portents. That's where the Haggadah stops quoting this, but in verse 9 it says, bringing us to this place and giving us this land, a land flowing with milk and honey. Wherefore I now bring the first fruits of the soil which you, God, have given us. You shall leave it before your God and bow low before your God. You shall enjoy together with the family of the Levite and the stranger in your midst all the bounty that your God has bestowed upon you and your household. So I couldn't help but emphasize the amount of times that it said land. Aretz, Aaron. It talks about coming to the land. So you can only imagine how this resonated with pioneers, Chalutzim, who were coming to the land of Israel after 2,000 years of exile. And they must have looked at this, Adam, as you say, this was totally focused on coming to this new land. Very powerful if you just look at the Chumash, at the Psukim.
Yeah, these are, obviously these are the most famous verses from the Haggadah, and now we played them out. So let's see what happens. The Mishnah now elaborates on what this is all about.
So, Aaron, when we were discussing this a few days ago, he said, take a look at this Mishnah. It's in Bikurim, the 3rd chapter, because not only are we going to read it, but we will see that the Chalusim, these secular pioneers, read it very carefully as well. It says, how does one set aside Bikurim? A man goes down into his field, he sees a fig that ripened or a cluster of grapes that ripened or a pomegranate that ripened. He ties a red rope around it and says, let these be Bikurim. There's almost a formula that needs to be said, and this is going to be something that's going to come up at the end and very interesting. Rabbi Shimon says, even so, he must again designate them as Bikurim after they have been plucked from the soil. So, of course, the rabbis always have to have a disagreement. Is it when you identify them, or is it when you harvest them? Then it says, how were the Bikurim taken up? It says to Jerusalem. That's what the translator adds. All the inhabitants of the cities of the Ma'amad would assemble in the city of the Ma'amad, and they would spend the night in the open street, and they would not enter any of the houses. Early in the morning, the officer would say, let us rise and go up to Zion, into the house of the Lord our God, quoting from Jeremiah. So notice that this is something that unites the country. In every city, in every town, this ceremony occurred, and it was a communal ceremony. It says specifically they didn't go into individual houses. They were in the public space, and they were gathering. Those who lived near Jerusalem would bring fresh figs and grapes, while those who lived far away would bring dried figs and raisins. An ox would go in front of them, his horns bedecked with gold and with an olive crown on its head. The flute would play before them until they would draw close to Jerusalem. When they drew close to Jerusalem, they would send messengers in advance, and they would adorn their Bikurim. The governors and chiefs and treasurers of the temple would go out to greet them, and according to the rank of the entrance, they would go forth. All the skilled artisans of Jerusalem would stand up before them and greet them, saying, our brothers, men of such and such a place, we welcome you in peace. I had never focused on any of this stuff. I went to a traditional yeshiva. I was focused on the giving of the Torah, eating cheesecake, staying up all night and reading. And whether it was this gathering of each particular town, notice how it focuses on that. When they come to Jerusalem, they kind of get announced. This is like the Republican or the Democratic National Convention. Let the delegates from Georgia come. Let the ones from Jaffa in the Galilee come. So this is an amazing backdrop. And what we're going to read next is from Yitzchak Michaeli. Why don't you tell us a little bit about him before we read his absolute poetry, Iran?
I will tell you, he was one of the pioneers from Kibbutz Ein Harod, and this quote is from a very unique protocol that we have in our archive, and it's a protocol of a conversation that took place during the 20s in Kibbutz Ein Harod, in the Harod Valley or Jezreel Valley. And now during the 20s, Kibbutz Ein Harod held several discussions about the proper way to celebrate the holidays after returning to the land of Israel. Now, this excerpt is taken from one of the discussions that focused on Shavuot, and maybe you will read it for us.
Okay, so for those who want to read it in the original Hebrew, please go to the Sefaria notes. It is beautiful. Here it is in the English. Behold, this is a true revolution. Thus we have broken through and shall celebrate the festival in a manner different from that in which our forefathers celebrated it in the diaspora. Now we have returned to the field. In the diaspora, it was a festival of the home, full of spiritual content with hymns and prayers and holiday symbols. As remnants of the physical splendor that existed in the past. And just as the work of the land today, where we drill wells and pierce the rock until we reach the clear subterranean waters, so are we commanded to delve and penetrate to the source of our festivals and to bring them up from the depths of the Jewish people's life in the past, the purest subterranean waters of our ancient culture, in order to return and flow them through the channels of influence that were blocked during the years of the diaspora. Rabbi, is this amazing or is this amazing?
I love the fact that he's actually moving the holiday from the home to the field. That's such a fantastic movement. And obviously, it's not only this holiday, but that's the diaspora. We celebrate everything in the home. We still celebrate everything in the synagogue. And he's moving everything to the field. That's such an early Zionist move, which is fantastic.
I think also he talks about in the Golah, when we celebrate holidays, we use symbols. We act as though we have remnants, she'erut. We talk about the remnants of Israel. We have she'erut of the physical splendor. When we get to the land, he talks as a materialist. We're touching the ground. And I love the fact that he uses the metaphor of digging, which can only remind us of Pirkei Avot that says, Hafach ba v'hafach ba dekula ba. Dig in it, you'll find everything. He's going back to our sources. To your point, Rabbi, about moving from the home to the public space, or as you said, to the field, I saw that in the Mishnah. Remember, they said overnight, don't go into the homes. It was all the public space. It's just amazing, Iran. Thank you so much for bringing this.
Yes, that now, according, it expresses a cultural view that the past is a symbiosis between the person living in the land and the culture connected to the soil, to the landscape, to the seasons. And this is when last time we did together a podcast, you called it an organic Judaism. And this is the origin organic Judaism where it began.
Now, what I'm showing on the screen now, correct me if I'm wrong, Iran, is the catalog page from your catalog. And we have Sichot al HaChagim, Ein Charod, the name of the kibbutz. And it has, I guess in section 1, Al Pesach. It has it on Tisha B'Av. It has it on, what's the next one?
Al HaChagim.
Al HaChagim.
Yes. Unbelievable archive that you have. And now we get to the really exciting part, because you told me, Iran, that what they did is they translated that ox with the 2 horns that had gold edges on it to a tractor. First of all, Rabbi, I was surprised that we have the chutzpah to put an ox with gold on it. Ain't Ketego Nasa Senego. I mean, are we reminding?
That's pretty funny. That's a different holiday.
Yeah. But anyway, look at this tractor. Tell us what we're looking at, Iran. And of those of you who are listening to this and not watching it on YouTube, I do apologize. You can look in the source sheet or watch it on YouTube, but it is the oldest tractor you've ever seen. It looks like hay, the omer, the wheat coming out of the front. They are driving it. Looks like everybody is in white. Am I correct?
Yes. Yeah, first of all, we have to say that in the Mishnah, there is a precise description, like a movie script, that depicts how the people brought the Bikurim to the temple. And all that remained was to recreate and renew the route. And on Shavuot, what you see here is in 1928, all of the kibbutzim of the Israel Valley gathered at one point. Each kibbutz brought its fruits, and together they create a procession to a common assembly place. And as you said, the ox that was customary in the Mishnah was replaced by a tractor and decorated with golden horns and with olive leaves crown. And something interesting, the remaining challenge was to whom to bring the bikurim. In the ancient ceremony, they were brought to the Kohanim and Leviim who served in the temple. Now, here, a new decision was made to sell the fruits and the bikurim and the produce of the various kibbutzim, and to donate all the money collected jointly to the Jewish National Fund. In the pioneer perspective, the Jewish National Fund is a tool of the entire Jewish people that redeems the lands of Israel, is what replaced the temple. And the renewal of the holiday was heard throughout Israel, and every year hundreds and thousands came to the valley to watch the Bikurim procession and the ceremonial donation.
And of course, there's a sign there that says "V'navi b'churei ad matenu," which is obviously echoing what we saw in Deuteronomy. Asher tavi ma'artzecha. They really felt that they were fulfilling what the Torah said in Jeremiah. It says, "At that time," declares God. So this is a prophecy of when we will come back to the land. "I will be God to all the clans of Israel, and they shall be my people. Thus said God, the people escaped from the sword, found favor in the wilderness when Israel was marching homeward." In Hebrew, some of you will find this very familiar. Matzah chen b'midbar, am suride chorov, holoch lahargia Yisrael. They talk, "O titmu kamecha," that again you shall take up your hand rubs and go forth to the rhythm of the dancers. You shall plant vineyards on the hills of Samaria. Come, let us go up to Zion. And here too, at the very end, it says, "Thus said God, cry out in joy for Jacob, shout at the crossroads of the nations, sing aloud in praise and say, save, O Eternal One, your people, the remnant of Israel, She'erit Yisrael." This is truly tied in to coming back into the land. We saw the verses in Deuteronomy coming back into the land. We see these words in the prophets. So what they did was so organic. You used that word before, Iran, quoting me. And here are some other pictures that you provided. What do they have here in terms of the sign here? Are they saying how much crops they brought, or what do they call
How
it?
many dunam, like acres? It's like it's the year. It said that 2 years ago in Tafresh Tzadik Hey, we had 80 dunams, and 2 years later, Tafresh Tzadik Het,
We have
it's
600.
600 dunams.
It's a progress report. They are
Yes.
saying we are growing, we are stronger. But again, I never realized how this was a unifier. And if there's anything that Israel needs, I drive through the highways and all I see is Yachad Ninatseach, together we shall win. Unfortunately, that lasted about 5 minutes. The country is totally divided. Here we have a Chag that was designed to have everybody in the periphery, in the center, show what they've produced, come together, enjoy. These pictures are just amazing. So now you can't do anything good without being criticized. I mean, that's just who we are. We Jews build 2 shuls, the one we go to and the one we wouldn't be caught dead in. So now we're going to have the words that were written by Rabbi Yehuda Leib Maimon from the Mizrahi Party, and he thought this was a terrible idea. He
He
said,
was the head of the Mizrahi movement.
okay,
He was very influential in his day.
Yes, yes. He also one of that his signature is signed on the Liberation
the
Declaration.
Declaration of Independence.
48,
Amazing.
yeah.
Oh, wow. He writes as follows: "We must relate with absolute negativity to this festival of the first fruits, the holiday which well-known activists fabricated some time ago and is becoming entrenched within us. Again, when I first read these, I didn't understand quite where he was coming from, and it almost sounded as if he was saying, because everything that we've said is, this is what was written in the Torah, and he's telling us, this is not it in the Torah. He says there is only room to fear that if it becomes a fixed custom whereby every city in the land of Israel will designate for itself a special holiday. He's like saying they made this stuff up, and if
They made it up.
it's a
Right.
slippery slope. People are going to be reinventing Judaism everywhere, chas v'shalom. The danger lies in that false tradition, which includes both ignorance and a lack of knowledge, and also because of the destruction of religion and the lack of good taste. That tradition of bringing first fruits on the day after Shavuot. These male and female students who are used to adorn and exalt this quote-unquote holiday surely think that on the Feast of Weeks they actually are bringing first fruits in the days of old. But the truth of the matter is that between the Feast of Weeks, the day of the first fruits written in the Torah, and the bringing of the first fruits in the temple in splendor and majesty with blessing and prayers, there is nothing. There is no connection between what they're doing and what was in the temple. To give him credit, I think his challenge is that they are making that statement from the Mishnah that we started with. Remember, I said there's a formula, and the formula is you say, these are the Bikurim, and like many other things, when you say that formula, these things become holy. And the challenge is, how can you say that when we don't have a temple? But certainly the way, the vitriolic nature of this, Adam, had you been aware of this whole controversy?
Never. And it's so interesting that he felt so strongly against it. Because, like you said, it's only a wonderful thing. It brings everybody together. But they felt it that it's threatened because it changes the nature. And the Orthodox don't like to change the nature of things. This is a remarkable, piece of our history that nobody knows anything about.
Okay, so Aaron, you quoted from Rabbi Maimon. I looked up to see what Rav Kook said, and he said this a year later. So first of all, the way he starts is totally different. He says, Chaverim Yikarim, my dear brothers. The commemoration of the Bikurim, which is customary to be celebrated in our country in connection with the holiday of Shavuot, in many ways inspires us and gives us a sense of clarity. Although it is not the Bikurim that we are celebrating now, but the commemoration of the Bikurim. We will not be among those who are content with little in the return of our homeland, as long as foreigners rule over the place of our life's home, as long as we are torn apart by law even within our national home, as long as we do not have the strength to gather the majority of our persecuted people to our holy land and to arrange it in worldly glory as in the days of old, where the temple and the kingdom in all their fullness are the symbols of this complete life. We cannot say the full name Bikurim, which is associated with the holy and the temple, which is associated with freedom and self-kingdom in all our full glory. But a resting place for us is both the tiny subsistence and the tiny side of redemption that is gradually being revealed through our building projects, in which you, beloved brothers, are active in your amazing pioneering dedication. Well, the commemoration of the Bikurim, he wanted people to say Zecher LeBikurim, not Zeh HaBikurim. He wanted to say as a remembrance of the Korban Pesach, as a remembrance of the Bikurim, and beautiful for us. And you are blessed for your participation and the effort and honor that you give to the Jewish National Fund. So he really fills in the blanks that you raised you on. He recognizes that they're giving the money to an amazing cause. He's calling them holy brothers. And really what he's trying to say in a very nice way is, here's the compromise. please don't call these Bikurim, call these Zecher LeBikurim. But at least he understands what they're trying to do. And of course, if you know his philosophy, this was the Hatchalta de Geula. This was the beginning of the Geula, but there were still Jews suffering, and there were still Jews being persecuted. And he says there, and there were still divisions amongst us. So I felt this letter too doesn't detract from the revolutionary nature of what they were doing on the kibbutz, but it does paint a different side to some of our Orthodox colleagues.
This is remarkable, Jeffrey. And to see the difference between Rabbi Maimon and Rabbi Kook, you're right, both in the substance, but just in the manner in which they speak is remarkable.
So what I want to conclude is, about 10 years ago, I was invited to a Passover Seder in Efrat. And the person who was running the Seder, his father-in-law is a great rabbi. And what I could not believe was that he had a barbecue and he was roasting the lamb. And of course, we Jews from the Gola, we are brought up thinking you can't roast the lamb. And it really resonates to this discussion here, because someone might think this is actually the Korban Pesach and not Zecher LeKorban Pesach. But I think, and I haven't found this in any Google search, that there are probably now some very nationalistic Jews who are not satisfied with Rav Kook and actually are acting in a similar way to the kibbutznikim. And they too are saying, we have to bring the redemption. We have to start going to the Temple Mount, things that in the old days were forbidden. We have to start barbecuing our Passover lamb. And so I did find a question that was raised, and the gentleman who raised it says as follows. He says, sometimes genius comes from the mouth of babes. And my daughter said to me, if we really believe the Mashiach can come at any moment, how come we don't designate Bikurim? And what he does is he brings a halachic ruling, and it's based a little bit on that discussion we had from the Mishnah of, is it when you determine that there are Bikurim or when you reap them? There's a little bit of a safek there. And he also believes that if the Messiah doesn't come between when you identify the Bikurim and when the day after Shavuot, the rabbis can be mevatel, just like they can be mevatel a neder or other forms. But the point that I want to make is, we have Jews today that are very Orthodox, very religious, that are actually trying to reclaim the Bikurim in a similar fashion as the kibbutznikim. They are not satisfied with 2,000 years of pacifist and non-active Judaism. So I found that just to be amazing. The real takeaway that I took from this is, yes, one of the sources that you said is we can celebrate Matan Torah because the Matan Torah are those wells that the kibbutznikim were digging to find that living water deep in the ground. But we have to be able to celebrate the unity of this beautiful Bikurim ceremony, and we owe such a token of thanks to these kibbutznikim who had very strong learning in our texts, who reinvented this amazing ceremony.
Fantastic. Thank you, Eran, for joining us. This is something that really is an education for me. And, it's a wonderful way to go into the holiday of Shavuot. And those photographs are absolutely fantastic. Thank you.
Great. Thank you too. And I invite you next year to come to one of the ceremonies in one of the kibbutzim here in Israel and to see it live.
Thank you.
It still exists till today, correct?
Yes, of course, in a lot of kibbutzim, and more after the October 7.
Amazing. Okay, wishing all of our listeners a Chag Sameach, a Shabbat Shalom, as we count the Omer and we grow in expectation for this beautiful holiday in front of us. Chag Sameach.
Chag Sameach.